Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacqueline. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacqueline at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. I'm the president, founder, and chief listening officer here at our network, where we are 29 live shows strong each week. Our show today is Rapping with Dr. Jacqueline, a show about nothing. What does that even mean? What it means is my guests and I will be here in our virtual living rooms, and we will be having a chat, and wherever that chat goes, that's where we will take it. So I'm super excited to welcome back someone who's been on our platform before, which is always a great sign to me when people come back. We really love that. Her name is Erin Galyean, and she is the badass advocate. Woo! She is a speaker, trainer, and author. Let's welcome her to the show. Hi there. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I love a show about nothing. It's great.
It's such a pleasure to see you again. I really enjoyed. I think you were on 2 other shows, yes?
I was. It's great to see you too.
Yeah, and I just love that name, Badass Advocate. We're going to dive into that, but I just love saying that. It just feels so super strong.
You're not the only one. Let me tell you, you're not the only one. I didn't know that would happen when I wrote it.
First of all, tell us where you're joining us from.
So I'm in Plano, Texas, which is just about 30 minutes north of Dallas.
Okay, wow, I love it, because we have a lot of friends who are from that same area, so it's wonderful. And as I spoke with you about backstage, I'm actually in Avalon, New Jersey, and I know you have connections to this area as well.
Yes. So I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia in Newtown Square, which for people that are not from Philadelphia is kind of near Villanova University if you're a basketball fan. And then I'm part of a huge family, big Irish family on both sides. And I grew up going to the Jersey Shore where you are. So Avalon, Sea Isle, Cape May, all those areas. So I know exactly where you are. And I miss going there because I miss seeing my family and having those fun days at the beach.
Yeah, it's a great place to be. I'm going to say that at some point you got to get out of here, though, because the weather's changing, and I'm looking forward to leaving here very soon. So, but Erin, with your title, Badass Advocate, what does that mean? I know what it means, but tell our audience, what does it mean?
Yeah, so I wrote a book. I'll tell you a little bit about my background because the title doesn't make sense without the background, I think. So in 1997, my father Mike was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And 10 months later, my dad passed away. So he was the life of the household. He was a lot of fun. And like I said, he came up from a huge family, lots of siblings and nieces and nephews. And he was just always that guy that at the party was the one you wanted to be hanging out with. But he was also like that at home. He was happy and positive and just a really wonderful, supportive father. And when he passed away, it obviously broke our family's hearts and it was a hard time. My dad was only 53 years old when he passed away. Fast forward 20 years, and my sister Megan, whose personality was a lot like my father, maybe not as much the partier in the fact that she had to be, was the center of attention and the one telling the jokes, but she was so kind and sweet, just like our father. And she was the best big sister. My sister Megan was also diagnosed with non Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2017. The cancer ended up actually being the good news. The bad news was that the cancer caused a lung disease, a very rare and aggressive lung disease, and called bronchiolitis obliterans. You don't need to know the name if you're not familiar with it. It's okay. It's actually also known as popcorn lung. So it was just devastating news. And sort of like my father, within 13 months, my sister's body just deteriorated, and it was all due to the lung disease. She was actually cancer free within 5 months, which was a great win, but the lung disease had already progressed and it was continuing to progress, and it wasn't good. In 2018, my sister passed away at the age of 47. She was just 3 days shy of her 48th birthday. So actually, her birthday's coming up on October 16th. So we'll be celebrating her and her life. And after she passed away, I clearly was devastated, as well as the rest of my family. She had a family of her own, and it was a hard time. I also knew that I needed to get through the grief, and I needed to not allow this death be in vain. And so I decided I would take what I learned from advocating for my sister. And as background, I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for over 20 years. I train pharmaceutical reps how to speak to physicians, how to ask good questions, how to handle difficult conversations. And a lot of these things that I've learned along the way, and that I also teach others how to do, they came in handy when I was advocating for my sister, whether she was hospitalized or she was at home, going to doctor's appointments. These are things that a lot of caregivers and family members, they don't know how to do because they've never been there before. And I thought, rather than taking over 20 years to learn it through my work experience, and they might not be in that industry, why don't I just tell people how and share this knowledge with others and other families, and share with them how they can do what I did. And not that I was the best, but I certainly can hopefully help other families to advocate for their loved one. And so that's where the title Badass Advocate came from. Not because I thought I was a badass advocate, but I'm hoping that I can teach you how to be a badass advocate for your loved one.
Thank you so much, Erin. And having heard your story before, I'm continuously moved by it. It's just amazing. Do you find that each time you help someone that you're also still helping yourself with your own grieving process and what you've been through?
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like every time I get positive feedback, which as an author, you don't always get the feedback. Like, I could be helping people that I never hear from, and that's fine. That's part of it, because, and hopefully it'll continue that way, because if it grows, then I'll touch people that I'll never know. When I do hear feedback from someone, it gives me such joy, and it makes me feel like my sister's living on through them, through me. And that's really all I ever wanted.
That's beautiful. What are some of the key learnings that you found based on your experience when it comes to us not knowing what to say or do or ask to advocate
Mhm.
for ourselves or our family members?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I find that that's probably the number one most difficult thing for family members, is asking questions. We have this feeling towards physicians, which is well deserved, that we have a respect for them. We put them on a pedestal. At the same time, I don't want to put them on such a high pedestal that we feel like we can't ask difficult questions, that we can't give pushback. That's not the goal. You need to. If you're advocating for someone else, you are their voice, as long as you have their permission to do that. And sometimes they're so sick, they really need a voice. And if you're that person, you need to be brave enough to voice your opinions or your thoughts and ask those questions. So one tip that I give in the book, and I actually was just at a sales conference last week and we talked about this, was asking open-ended questions. If you're not in sales, you may not think about how you ask questions or the type of questions you ask. And so we talk a lot about this in sales. Basically, there are two types of questions when you break it down. There are open-ended questions and close-ended questions. Open-ended questions are those that start with what, when, how, who. And the goal of those types of questions is that you solicit more information from the person who is going to answer your question. On the flip side, a close-ended question are questions that start with do, is, are, and those questions solicit yes, no answers. Now, There is not a bad or good. So it doesn't mean that open-ended questions are good and closed-ended questions are bad. Not at all. They just serve different purposes, and it's understanding when to use them. So my tip to people is come up with a list of questions before you're going to meet with a doctor or any healthcare provider where you need to gain more information or understanding about the patient. Write those questions down. Just brainstorm. Don't edit yourself. I like to call it a brain dump. Just get it out there. Then go back and evaluate your questions. This will not take you that long, 5, 10 minutes. I guess it depends on how many questions you have. The more, the better, though. Don't stop yourself. And you may find that some of the questions are getting to the same point, and you could cross those out and make it one better question. But you're going to reevaluate your questions. And if you find that a lot of them are close ended and you need them to get more, you need to get more information about that topic, then you can convert it into an open ended question. Close ended questions are great for clarifying. So, doctor, if I heard you correctly, did you say that my mom should be walking twice a week at a minimum? Okay, that's clarifying. Before you ask that, you might want to ask an open ended question. So, doctor, when it comes to my mom's exercise, what should she be doing? How many times a week should she be exercising? What kind of exercise is good for her? Those are all open ended questions. They really open up the door for that physician, that physical therapist, that occupational therapist, whoever you're speaking to, a nurse. It gives them the opportunity to give you any information they have up in their head without you leading them down a road. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And thanks for sharing those great tips. What if we happen to encounter a physician or healthcare worker who's a little tired and burnout, or maybe cranky,
Mhm.
or is really on the clock? I've got 8 minutes for you right now. I don't have time to answer these questions. What do we
Mhm.
do then?
Okay, so a couple of things when I hear you ask this question. If someone comes in and they say, I have limited time, I would make sure before you go into that office or that meeting, especially if this is something that you find is happening and you're really like this physician, you want to stay with them, I would pick out your most important questions and say, Doctor, I know that you have limited time. Here are the 4 questions that I need answered today. If he or she hears you say, I have a certain number, it allows them to know that time is limited. One thing that we do sometimes as humans, not everyone does this, but some of us who are very talkative, like me, we might take too long to get to the point. So, really, having those questions written down is going to make the best use of that time with that provider. Now, that's if you like that provider and you feel like it's working well for the patient wants to stay with that provider. If you feel like your loved one is not getting the attention that they need, it is time to maybe reevaluate and discuss that with the patient. It is not your decision typically. In some situations it will be, but let's say in most it is not your decision to decide to leave and find a new physician. So discuss with the patient. If it's not a good fit, go get second opinions. Go ask for referrals from the other providers that maybe you're dealing with. And ask friends, ask family, neighbors. People have a wealth of information that they don't always share because they don't know that you need it. So don't be afraid to ask. And it's that then it's time to maybe switch to a different physician. Please don't feel bad about that. You are advocating for someone else. When I was advocating for my sister, and I wasn't the only one, we had my sister was married, we had my mom and my brother and my sister-in-law and my husband. We all helped as a team. We had some others as well. We made sure that we were always working on her behalf and had the mindset. It's a mindset that no matter what, I'm going to put myself out there and I may do something that's uncomfortable for me in order to fight for my sister, not just for her health, but for her to get the best care possible. Sometimes, like in my sister's case, we couldn't do anything about her lung disease. It was what it was, but we could get her the best care possible. And that's what it turned out to be. And that was our focus.
Yeah, that was the ultimate outcome. And
Mhm.
something that I just want to reiterate that you mentioned is about getting to the point quickly. I can imagine if someone came in to see a doctor and said, "Oh, doctor, I researched on Google and I found this." No, right? They don't need that information. We
No.
need the information from them, and not for us to tell what Doctor Google has to say. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I have two thoughts. One, yes, not Google. I agree with you. I do have on my website, and I did this purposely for this exact what you're asking about, is I have a list of some reliable websites. If it has to do with like studies and medical information, these are websites that some of the medical professionals that work for my company use. And so I share them because they're public websites. It's not private to my company. They're public, but these medical professionals believe in them, they rely on them. And I thought they won't necessarily always be easy to find and you won't know what they are. So I put them up there. So if you need to do some research on your own, you're going to a reliable website. Obviously, no matter what you find on this earth, there is always biases. So that's something to be aware of. But I do believe in doing some of your due diligence, doing some of your research. If you're not good at that, which it's not my strong suit, I would look to someone within your family or a friend that the patient is okay with you confiding in them, asking them to help you with some of the research. If you're the primary caregiver, it is great to delegate some things like that if that's not your wheelhouse. If you love that and you're good at that, great, then you can do it. But you might have a lot on your plate, might not be where you want to spend your time. And then I definitely would, if you go in there and you say, I Googled it, that is endless, those possibilities. You're probably going to lose credibility and you probably will frustrate a physician. I will tell you from personal experience, just in pharmaceutical sales, doctors really don't like that. But if you come in with a study and it's based on because you're researching, you are confused about what's going on, that's different than just to argue with a physician. You have to really understand the situation before you just come in with a bunch of information. Do you need to bring in that information? Some cases you will, in others, you can just, listen to the physician, ask good questions. If it's like a standard illness that is very common, like let's say breast cancer, and you're going to a really well known breast cancer oncologist, well, then maybe you don't need to go do a ton of research. It depends upon the situation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think one of the key points is that if, regardless of who we're dealing with, whether it's this situation or another, once you come in with an attitude where you're argumentative or you're questioning or you're trying to control the situation, that immediately causes for some kind of uncomfortableness and might not be the outcome that you want, right?
I agree. And it's so funny because both my father and my sister had a very laid back demeanor. And that doesn't mean that they just took whatever was given to them. It doesn't mean that they couldn't ask questions. It's all about a healthy balance. And I talk about that a lot in my book that one, if you tend to be intimidated and quiet, you need to have a voice. But there's the flip side where there's some of us who come in guns ablazing, we're fired up, it's an emotional time. You need to reel it in. These are your healthcare team. You're supposed to be working with them, not against them. And then at the same time, if your gut is telling you something is off, then follow that. But most of the time, the physicians that we're working with and that are treating our loved ones, they have great intentions. They are good physicians. And so we really need to work with them, not against them.
I agree. And I think also that we're already highly charged because we're so concerned about our loved
Yeah.
one in the situation. And we have to take that into consideration too. Erin, I have pulled up your website, which I'd love to have you walk us through if that's okay.
Okay. Sure.
All right, perfect. Let me share my screen.
Especially since I just talked about the websites, then
I
people
know,
can find
perfect
them
timing.
easily.
Okay, so I'm over here on your website. Let me know where to go.
Okay. So if you go to the top left, it says About, and there's a drop down menu. And it just talks about my story, and I tell you how to navigate the website. So if after you listen to this interview, you want to go back and you don't remember what I said about this site, kind of walks you through the different things I have. And then if
Perfect.
you go to the next tab, it says free resources. This is what I was talking about. So, number one is the action guide. If you fill out the form, you click on that, there's a form you can fill out. I will receive an email and you'll get an action guide automatically sent to you with some highlights from the book. So, if you want to do it that way and you want to get some information and see if it's worthwhile for you, It's probably a good place to start.
Okay.
And then the resources, if you want to click on that one. So I have a bunch of free downloads, and these are things that I really used when my sister was sick. And there are other ways to do this, certainly, but if you don't feel like recreating the wheel, I'm all about helping each other and kind of brainstorming and coming together. And that's what I do a lot as a trainer. So why not just steal what I use? I'm happy for people to use it. There's mind maps, there's templates in there are examples in there. We used a medication tracker for my sister. It was just an Excel spreadsheet. There are apps now you can use. So if you can't stand Excel, and I know there's many of us that can't, that get frustrated by Excel, there certainly are apps that are probably wonderful as well. My
So
dog's making some noises in
comprehensive.
the, yeah,
I love
yeah.
it.
Thank
I
you.
love it. Where
And
should
then
we
the
go next?
last, and then if you go back to free resources, I just want to share with you reliable links. This is what I was talking about. And I add to this regularly. In fact, I just updated it probably 2 weeks ago. I find out about companies just from being in this caregiving world and networking. And when I find a company that I'm like, wow, this is awesome what they're doing, I add it to this page, and it goes on for a while. So what I would do is, if you get overwhelmed by this, look at the red headings, see if there's anything that you're needing help with, and look under that heading for the different companies. And there's so many that I haven't even added in here that I haven't discovered myself, but there's so many great resources, and sometimes they're a small little company in the corner of the US that you've never heard of, and hopefully I can expose you to some companies that can help you.
Wow. Look at all
There
of this.
there's those websites, some of those websites my company uses, the which one? I think you go down a little bit further. The Medicine Net is one they use. Yeah. The Webster's Medical Dictionary is great just because medical jargon is really overwhelming. Even being in pharmaceuticals, I'm in a certain division, right? So I know certain areas of pharmaceuticals, and that's my jargon that I understand, but there's a whole body that I'm not familiar with, and I didn't know bronchiolitis obliterans. I mean, that is a mouthful. And so things like that, you could go on that website and you could enter in what you're trying to learn about and learn some terminology. That really helps you as a patient advocate to sound educated when you're asking questions, and it gives
Mhm.
you some authority.
Absolutely. How long did it take you to put together all these links here?
It took a while. This is when I first started, and then, like I said, I've come back. Like that Pink Fund, I just learned about that at a conference a couple weeks ago. They give financial support to breast cancer patients. I was like, this is amazing. I've got to share this. So I'll constantly add things when I find it useful. And under the white papers, these are other ones that our medical team will use: National Center for Biotechnology Information and PubMed. They have studies, and they are government websites. So,
Yeah, you've updated the website since you were here last.
hmm hmm so there's tons of stuff. Vital signs is great to understand what a vital signs is. You're not going to learn it from me. I'm not the physician, but you can learn it from a reliable website. And they don't, I don't get paid by these websites. It's purely just to help you. They're just websites I find that I like.
Fabulous.
And then the other 4 pages to the right are probably self-explanatory. I have the link to my books. Not only do I have my book, but I also came out with journals the beginning of this year. I have a 90-day journal, and then I have 3 30-day journals. I wish I could show everyone in person what these look like, because the pictures don't do them justice, but they're beautiful. I just went to a conference and sold out of them quickly because the attendees just love them. I wish I had brought more, but they really help a caregiver to walk through how to set up their day for success. I came up with a concept called the 5 R's. The first one is reflect. So you start the day with reflecting on your feelings and what you're going through. And I always ask a question every day, and every day is a different question. Sometimes they're a little bit more challenging than others, especially if you don't like to think or talk about your emotions. Review is reviewing your calendar and what's going on for the day and what's coming up that week. Re-examine is, you want to re-examine the patient. the patient's care? Is there anything that needs following up? Reevaluate. Reevaluate is to reevaluate your support team, the care team that you've created out of family and friends and neighbors and whoever to help support that patient. Does anyone need some extra love and support this week? Does anyone need a break? My mom was the main caregiver. Sometimes we wanted her to get out. And so we would come over and take care of my sister because it was a lot for my mom to constantly be caregiving every day. Not everyone has that luxury. I realize it. So, you have to get creative as to how you can give that person support. And then the last one is recharge. And that's the last thing you do so you can get yourself ready for the day, whether that is exercise. Do you like to pray? Do you like to meditate? Whatever it is, go walk in nature. Whatever it is that fits your personality and what you believe in and what you love to do, finish off that last 10 to 30 minutes doing that, giving yourself some self-care before you start the day. And that's what the journal will walk you through.
Wow, that's such an important asset for someone to have, especially as a caregiver, because to your point, and I noticed you have a number of links that are for caregivers. There's a lot of caregiver burnout, there's
Mhm.
anger, resentment, and at the same time, feeling guilt about the
Yeah.
anger and resentment. It
It's
just
a
goes,
lot. It's a lot.
it really is. Let me go back over here. Anything else you want to share with people?
And then the blog are actually, I have guests who blog for me, people that I meet, some of my friends who have been patients, who have a message they want to share. And I just like to get their message out because whatever they've gone through, you may relate to, or sometimes they have kind of like what I was talking about before. Someone will create this little company that people might not know of. And I'm like, you need to share this, or I need to share it through you so people can learn about what you're doing and they can use it as caregivers. So there's a variety of articles in there. And of course, I have more coming. And then my podcast, I've been on podcasts, and then I do public speaking as well. So there's links if you're interested in having me come and speak. So yeah, lots of different
Fantastic.
things.
All right. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
It's my pleasure. And I'd love to have you read for us if you would.
Oh, yeah. Anything in particular?
I think caregiving, burnout, some of
Okay.
the things we were just talking about.
Let me flip there. I love this. Nobody ever asks me to read. All right. So let me see. I will read this first little section about avoiding caregiver fatigue. So it's exactly what you just brought up. So far, this book has focused on the patient and what you can do to powerfully advocate for them. Now, let's switch gears and focus on you, the caregiver. Getting the support you need is essential to your well being. Within the healthcare industry, the terms caregiver fatigue or caregiver burnout are commonly used to describe the serious consequences of caregiving, which can include fatigue, stress, anxiety, and depression. The website caregiverfatigue.com, which I think that's the one you just saw, clearly explains this phenomenon. Caregiver fatigue primarily refers to the physical exhaustion of looking after a care recipient. However, it is part of a larger descending staircase, metamorphically speaking, where each step leads you closer to caregiver depression. Caregiver stress can be from the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual toll that the effects of caring for another has upon a caregiver. In this chapter, we will focus on how to avoid caregiver fatigue. One important way to avoid it is to implement badass strategy number one, which is to create a support team that can help you with the many tasks involved in caregiving. You'll also need to make time for yourself, even if you don't think you have the time. To stay healthy and strong, you will need to commit to making yourself a priority. Let me stress the idea of making time. You deliberately need to take breaks from serving to create your own soul time, time that you set aside for activities that bring you peace and healing to your heart and mind. Soul time does not include running errands or doing housework. I know some of you, that's what your first thought was, but no, that's not what it is. Remind yourself that you are of no good to anyone, especially the patient, if you are worn down. Furthermore, the last thing you want to do is become the patient rather than the caregiver. And then I go on to give you some tips of how you can do that because I feel like for a lot, it seems impossible.
When you said about take time for yourself, I was thinking, oh yeah, go to the grocery store, get out the vacuum cleaner.
See, you're one of those people. And I think women, especially, sorry, men, but I think women especially think of all of the errands they need to run. It's just how we're wired. We're nurturers, but you really need to nurture yourself.
And I think I definitely agree with you. I think there's that guilt, though. There's that guilt about what happens if I go do something for myself and then something happens, and that's where you need the team.
Yes, you need the team, and there's ways to prepare for that. A lot, I repeat myself a lot in the book with preparation, and preparation is key for so many things. I already told you about the question asking, but if you're going to leave the patient, you want to be prepared, especially if you are the number one caregiver that's doing the day in and day out hard work. You have someone come in, even if they're a family member, and they have to take over your job. It's like any other job, right? If someone came in and took over my job, if I was going to go on medical leave or maternity leave, I would have to prep the person taking over my position for the next 3 to 6 months, right? Same thing, even though it's not that long, even if it's 3 to 6 hours, and I know you're probably like 6 hours, but let's say you're going away for the weekend or something like that. You need to prepare that person. So how do you do that? On the website, you just showed some free downloads. I have it on there. You can print out a patient care instruction sheet. What does every day look like? What should they be aware of? I give you a list of ideas to get your brain moving and kind of say, oh, yeah, I need to add that in there. We really actually did this with my sister. My aunt and uncle came down. We took my mom on a little beach vacation with the grandkids because even though my sister was the center of our family's care and attention, in the end, we also had young children, including her own, who needed to get away and they need to feel like life was normal. So think about that. Life doesn't stop either. So, how can you make that happen where you can get out the caregiver or you can relieve the caregiver if you're listening and you have a caregiver in your life? And that will be an easy transition and less stress on everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Hmm.
In your experience and speaking with people contacting you and in your own life, did you ever find that because there were a number of people who were on the team, your mom was the primary, was there ever any type of hurt feelings or anger between the team members about one person, two people, three people feeling like they were doing more on a regular basis than other people or not?
I know that's very common. I feel like our family was pretty good about that. And my sister also kind of, I think, set it up. It was mostly my immediate family doing it. So there weren't really heart feelings. And also we were all really involved. And my family understood that I live halfway across the US. My brother lived down the street. So did my mom. And obviously my sister's husband lived in the same house. So not so much there, but this is a common occurrence. And my advice to people like that, and I know it's not bulletproof, but is you do have to have candid conversations. And I would start to lay out, and I talk about them in the back of the book. I would start to lay out some positions that people can take over. So if you have, let's say you're the children and your adult children and you're taking care of your elderly parents. This is actually the one I probably hear about the most from people. You should assign roles to your siblings. Even if they live in Minnesota and you live in Texas, you can still assign them roles. And I give you examples. I mean, I live so far from my sister. She lived in South Carolina. I live in Texas, and I was still able to advocate for her and support my family. There are ways to do it, and they can take off some smaller things off your plate. So even if they're smaller things, it's still 1 to 5 less things you have to do in a day. Every little piece helps. So I would go out and ask them. Sometimes, believe it or not, people are naive to how they can help and they feel like maybe you enjoy it or you're just really good at it, or it comes natural to you. Also be aware sometimes some of us, some siblings are the ones that like to take charge. And when we do that, the other siblings will kind of take the back seat naturally, probably based on your history and how you grew up. So you may not intend to do that, and you want them to be involved, but they don't realize that you want that. Clear communication is the most important thing. If in the end you cannot get other people to help you, then you need to get creative. Start thinking about people in the community. Of course, there's always paid help, right? Could you get a cleaning person to come in? Could you pay the teenage girl down the street to walk your parents' dog? I mean, there's so many ways, or come unload the dishwasher. I'm telling you, I have a teenager. If our neighbor was sick and they needed someone to unload their dishwasher, that would be a great life lesson for my teenage daughter. So get creative and tap into people in the community. Look into charities as well. That's another good one.
More great points. Erin, I'm wondering, you talked about in the beginning of the episode here about open-ended questions. Is that a good strategy to also use with your team members when you're divvying out or assigning who's going to do what? What would you feel
Yeah.
comfortable with, or how much time can you commit to?
Yes. Yes, I would say a combination. So, yes, with the open-ended questions, I would be careful with the 20 questions or rapid questions. People tend to get defensive. Even doctors, you want it to be conversational. So, ask a question, then have a little conversation about the answer. Ask a question and then a conversation. You don't want it to be like, "What are you doing? What are you doing this weekend? How can you help?" Because then they're going to be like, "Whoa, guns ablazing, what's happening?" So make it as much as you can, a relaxed conversation. Maybe we'll get a coffee or have them come over, maybe over breakfast or a meal or something where you can talk through it and maybe set it up. We've done that with my family when my sister was sick, where we said, "Hey, we're going to set up a family meeting." We all went to my brother's house. We had a list of things that we wanted to discuss and follow up on my sister's care. So set the tone. We all need to be in this together for mom, and dad isn't doing well. He can't do all of it. I come over 4 days a week, but I have kids. I'm just making up a situation. I have kids and it's a little too much on my plate. I need some help. you know, Jim, can you help in this way? How much time during the week do you think you could come over? I mean, you do have to need that open communication for sure, and come with
Uh,
some ideas.
Yeah, ideas are great.
Hmm.
And a question I want to ask you is, as caregivers, we're fully engaged. And then when our loved one passes, there's
Mm,
like, wow, I've been doing this for so long. I'm not really sure what I should be doing. How do you get back to your life?
yeah. Um, a few things. So one, I would look, and now you're giving me an idea. I need to add a section on those reliable links. There are caregiving companies, like smaller ones that do retreats. So you might want to look into going on like a retreat or a vacation if you can afford it, or a little getaway. Even if it's not with caregivers, it could even be with your family or your friends, just to kind of regroup. You've just been through a lot. And then that person's gone. So you're grieving, and you might have been grieving when they're alive too. So it's just a lot to deal with. I wholeheartedly believe in therapy. So I know for some that's very hard, or you've never done it. Don't be afraid of it. We focus so much on childhood, on learning our math and history and science, but we don't focus on the emotions. We're not born and we're not taught how to deal with emotions. And so if you're my age or older, you may have never learned how to deal with your emotions. And grieving, if it's something new for you, well, that's a whole new level. There is a book, and I'm going to probably have to email it to you. I'm going to try and think of it, that I love. And again, I'm going to endorse this book, but I don't get paid for it. I have recommended it to so many friends. I have to think about it for a minute, but it is the best book I have found for dealing with grief and kind of walking you through it. This woman lost a child, and she shares her grief. I believe she was a psychiatrist or psychologist, and she shares other people's stories. And it really has helped me just to learn between that. And then I did group therapy this time. I did individual therapy after my dad passed away, and then I did group therapy this time. And they're both equally wonderful. So one is not better than the other. I just think it's whatever is best for you. But you definitely need to deal with your grief. I think the worst thing, not only no longer caring for someone, but them being gone, if they have passed away, hopefully they've gotten better and that's why you're no longer caring for someone. But if you've lost them, you need to deal with it. Sweeping under the rug is it's going to come out in another way and it won't be a good.
Yeah, I've seen that happen a number of times,
Mhm.
especially when the person hasn't cleared the air with their loved one, or they
Oh,
didn't feel like they spent enough time, or they didn't get involved enough in the care or before the person got sick. And then the person passes away and they're left with all of that guilt.
it's terrible. It's terrible. And I just remember the book. So before I forget, because people are probably like, what's this book? It's called Bearing the Unbearable. And I think her last name is, I think it's Joanne Cacciatore, but it's on Amazon. Bearing the Unbearable. Fantastic book about dealing with your grief. The just to address what you were saying, if your loved one is still here, I do talk about this in the book as well. Please have those conversations with them, even if you think they're going to recover. Ask those questions because you will never get that time back. That is one gift I wanted to make sure I told people, and I made sure it was in the book. I learned that after my father passed away, there was things I never asked him. I was young. I was 20 years old. I had wished I had. And I wish I had these conversations. Was he scared? What I wanted to learn more about his childhood. What was he like as a teenager? My family's great about sharing stories, so I knew a lot, but still, not every family is like that. And I still had unanswered questions. And you've got to make the best use of that time with your loved one. When my sister got sick, I made sure that we had those conversations. There's always going to be things that you probably wish you had said. And that's just life and it's hard, but use that time while you can. Write those things down. What do you want to tell them? And if you have a hard time verbalizing it, maybe write them a letter.
I really like that idea of the letter. When my dad was really sick, I was caregiver along with my mother, and
Mm,
he was in the hospital and he wanted to get out of that hospital. And he was adamant. He's like, "You will sign me out of this hospital." And I didn't want to do it. And finally, it just got to the point where I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And I
yeah.
got him out. And I remember we were walking out and I was so angry. And I told him how angry I was at him. And now when I look back, I shouldn't have done that, because you know what? If somebody knows if they're going to, I think he knew he was dying and he didn't want to die in that hospital. But I felt so upset about it because I had to be the one to do it, because otherwise he wasn't getting out. So
Yeah. So what I would say to that, because I went through something similar with my father where I was really rude to him and I was never rude to my father when he was sick. And the therapist that I went to when I was in college, I wish I could find her and just thank her because she said, you know, just be easy on yourself because you're going through emotional time. And even if we know our loved one is dying, a lot of times our brain, we're in denial. So you have to be easy on yourself. And do you think that your father or whoever you've lost would be angry with you about that one incident? Knowing what they know, knowing that they were going to die and what you were going through, do you think they'd be angry with you? And knowing my father, my answer was no, of course not. And it helped me to relieve that guilt and not feel so bad about how I treated him that one afternoon for like, 5 minutes of conversation that I could not let go of. And we all have that. We all say things that we don't mean. If you have that time to make it up, do it now. Don't wait. That's all I would say. I was blessed with my sister. We always said I love you. We're an I love you family. If you're not, become one because you don't get that time back.
it's so true. And there's that other adage of don't go to bed angry,
Mhm.
which, because we never know what's going to happen overnight. And something else I just wanted to share, because this comes up a lot. I've heard this from various people, especially people in the healthcare industry as well, is that the loved one may want to come home and die there, but we don't do that, or we don't go along with it because of
Mhm.
what it's going to take, what happens to the body as they start shutting down, and what it's going to do to the
Mhm.
house and this, that, and the other. And I think that's really kind of I don't have the answer for that as to what's the best thing to do. But obviously, when we start going through the process of dying, things change in our body and we need help. And the person wants to come home. It's kind of like, I'm not sure what the answer is. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know either. Just my personal thoughts are that I would put yourself in their shoes. One day we're all going to die. And if you wanted to come home and you know that was the end of your life, would you want your loved ones to give you that opportunity? I would. I would want them to listen to me. I know it's hard on the people that are there, but think about the gift that you're giving them. That's just my thought process, is that you are giving them a gift of being at home around their loved ones, not around machines. And also, people don't sleep really well in a hospital. You think they would, but they're constantly waking you up. And for those of you that are with someone in the hospital right now, you know what I'm talking about. So maybe they want to come home and feel at peace and in a home where they're comfortable and they feel loved. And I understand that.
Yeah, it's such a good point that you made. When people are in the hospital, it's almost like they're being tortured, but they're not, because the medical staff has to keep waking them up and
I
waking them
know.
up, and it's freezing cold. They've got that little thin blanket, and maybe they're in a room with somebody else. This just happened to one of our good friends, and the person had mental problems. They were screaming and yelling
Oh,
the whole time. It's, and that in and of itself can make you a nervous wreck and bring you with filled with anxiety, which is not good for anyone.
I think the other thing, now you're getting me thinking about it. The other thing is sometimes we're in denial that our loved one's going to die. And so I would just caution you that if they're at the point where, if the physician hasn't told you yet, number one, I'd have a very candid conversation. It's hard. I did not do it with my father, but after I learned, I did it with my sister and I went and asked the physician. And they knew that we were part of the care team, so it was okay to tell us. But I asked two physicians how long my sister was going to live because it was looking grim. Now, if I were you and you feel like you're at that stage, but you don't know the answer, it is scary to get that answer. I understand. I totally understand. But I would push yourself to go ask, because the more information you know, the better you can make informed decisions. So I asked that question because I didn't live close. And one, I wanted to know how much time I had left with my sister. Two, I wanted to be able to talk to my husband about having to fly back and forth more. Should I bring my toddler with me? All of those decisions. If my sister was going to live and be fine, maybe I could travel less, because that was hard on my family. But no, they knew she wasn't going to live very long, and so I made it a priority to spend as much time with my sister as physically possible. You need to know the same information so you can make the decisions that are best for you and your family. So have those conversations. If part of that also leads to they can come home and die at home, you may need to know that. Is it going to be, I know no one has a magic number, physicians don't, so don't put that pressure on them, but they may give you an estimated time as to what they anticipate. That will give you an idea as to making that informed decision. So when should we bring them home? Should it be now? Should it be next week? Whatever it is, depending on what your family's going through. Sorry, I just hit my mic.
That's okay.
That's what
Thank
happens when you talk with your hands.
Erin, thank you so much. While we have you on Spotlight, can you please give your contact information? You've done a great job here today, as always, and who you would like to reach out to you.
Yeah, so my website you got to see is badassadvocate.com. And then you can email me at Erin, ERIN, at badassadvocate.com. My email's also on the website if that's easier for you. And then I am on every social media pretty much: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, even TikTok. So all of them except for TikTok, I'm at Badass Advocate. And then on TikTok, it's just my name, Erin M. Galyean. And on TikTok, I do share some tips on there. And then on the other social media channels, I share tips. I send reminders about disease awareness and all sorts of things.
You are outstanding. And I'm just so grateful for you being here again and being so authentic. You gave me a lot of great insights that I'm going to follow on, and your website and your book. So I wish you continued success getting out there helping other people. And I hope you'll come back and see us again.
I will. Thank you, Dr. Jacqueline. Thank you for having me. It's always so nice talking to you.
Thank you. I really
About
appreciate
nothing.
it. I know about nothing, but yet things that are so incredibly important
Yes,
because
they
there are
are.
so many people going through this around the world,
I
and
know.
we don't know what to do. And you do. And thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for having me. Good luck to everyone.
Thank you. Bye for now. Please do go over to Erin's website and also pick up a copy of her book. You will be very happy that you did. And again, don't suffer in silence. We do this, we punish ourselves, we beat ourselves up, but we don't. If you've never been with anyone who was dying, you never went through that process as a caregiver, how are you supposed to know what to do? So go over to Erin's website, badassadvocate.com, and you can see those links that she has there. Pick up her journals and get with it. So you start feeling better and become a really proactive team member for your loved ones. All right, our next show is coming up right after this. It's Talking Heads with Mr. Al Cini. And following that is another Talking Head session with our expert, Caroline Heward. So thank you again for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you shortly. Bye for now.